RAZ. It started small board, meetings I wasn't invited to, internal discussions I was told weren't necessary for me to attend. I brushed it off. They're just trying to move fast, I told myself. But then came the quarterly report, the first one I didn't receive directly. When I asked Jake about it, he waved his hand. Oh, sorry, man, I thought Alex sent that. It's all standard stuff. We're reinvesting profits, hiring, scaling. I should have pushed harder, but I trusted them. The real wake-up call at the holidays. The champagne flowed, music thumped, and everyone was toasting to the founders. I noticed the slides looping on a projector, photos, milestones, news clippings. Every one of them had Jake, Mara, and Alex front and center. I was nowhere. Not in the credits. Not in the captions. Not in the story. I walked up to the bar, feeling like a ghost at my own wake. Hell of a year, huh? Mara said, appearing beside me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, I said. Though you'd think I was just the janitor from that slideshow. She laughed lightly. Oh, come on. You said you didn't want to be in the spotlight. There's a difference between staying out of the spotlight and being erased, I replied. Her expression tightened for a fraction of a second. Then she raised her glass. You wanted to be silent. People, forget the silent ones first. That line stayed with me. The next few months were a blur of growth, new offices, new investors, new staff. But behind the smiles and press releases, things were rotting. I started noticing inconsistencies in the numbers. Expenses that didn't align. Contracts signed without my signature. Strategic decisions made without my approval. So I called a meeting. Look, I said, sitting across from them in the conference room, we need to realign. I don't feel like I'm part of the decision-making anymore. Jake leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. You're the investor, not the operator. You knew that going in. I'm the majority owner, I reminded him. On paper, Alex murmured. Silence fell like a dropped blade. Excuse me? I asked. He met my gaze. Operationally, the company moves with us. You're just a figurehead. That's how these things work. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I read every clause of the founding agreement, every paragraph, every signature. And there it was, black and white, what they had conveniently forgotten as the majority stakeholder. I held final authority over any acquisition, merger, or sale. The next day, I called a lawyer. For months, I played along. I smiled in meetings, approved budgets, even congratulated them on their strategic independence. Meanwhile, my lawyer quietly built the case. We identified the perfect buyer, Transglobe Logistics, their fiercest rival. The same company Jake had once called soulless corporate trash. When the offer came in, I didn't blink. It was clean, lucrative, and irreversible. And today, in that glass-walled conference room, as I signed the papers and watched their faces collapse, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not revenge. Peace. They wanted me to be silent. So I let silence be the sound of their empire crumbling. The moment. Final document was signed. The air in that conference room seemed to thicken. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling vents and the scratch of the chair legs as Jake finally pushed his seat back. His jaw worked like he was trying to chew through words he couldn't swallow. You can't do this, he said, his voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. I already did, I replied calmly, sliding the copy of the agreement toward him. It's legally binding. Effective, immediately. Marat's fingers gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. You blindsided us, she hissed. After everything we built together, you mean everything I financed, I said, my voice low but steady. You built with my money. My trust, my silence. Alex, always the one to think before speaking, just stared at the documents. His mind was already calculating, analyzing. You've sold us to Transglobe, he finally asked. Yes, his lips parted in disbelief. Do you have any idea what they'll do to the company? They'll gut it, lay off half the staff, fold Link into their system, and erase the brand. I met his gaze without flinching. Then, Miv, you'll finally understand how it feels to be erased. Jake stood abruptly, the chair skidding backward and slamming against the wall. You vindictive son of a bitch. He slammed his fist on the table. We trusted you. You said you'd Première rousse loli, adjust my jacket. You didn't want me involved. You made that clear when you stopped treating me like a partner. Mara stepped forward, tears burning behind her fury. You could have talked to us. I did. I interrupted. You just stopped listening. For a moment, no one moved. Then Jake's expression hardened, his anger giving way to something darker desperation. We'll fight it, he said. We'll get injunctions, call in investors. You won't, I said flatly. Because you don't have standing. You gave that up when you ignored the operating agreement. Every unauthorized contract, every unreported financial decision, each one is a breach. The board's already been notified. Marat's voice cracked. You had this planned. Yes, I said. For a long time, the silence that followed wasn't just anger, it was grief. The kind that comes when people realize their world just collapsed and there's nothing left to hold on to. I gathered my papers and turned toward the door. Behind me, Jake muttered something that... Collins again. I want out of the consulting agreement. I said, you can't just walk. He replied, you're still under contract. Then break it. I interrupted. I'm done working with them. He sighed. You'll take a financial hit. I already did, I said. Just not the kind that shows up on a balance sheet. That night, I met Mara again, this time by her request. Where's that? In a small diner, near the river, the kind that stayed open till late and served coffee that tasted like burnt regret. She slid her phone across the table. You saw the Atlas deal. I did. Then you know, it's not just a partnership. They're using Link's algorithm to build a predictive labor, distribution, system tracking. Monitoring everything we swore we wouldn't do. I rubbed my forehead. God damn it, you think you're the only one who feels betrayed, she said. We all fought to keep ethics in place. You gave them the keys. I looked at her, exhausted. What do you want me to do? Mara. It's done. Undo it. Her eyes met mine, steady and fierce. You've got the leverage. You still have a seat at the table, even if it's symbolic. You could expose them publicly. I hesitated. That would destroy my reputation. She smiled faintly. Maybe, but it might save your soul. I stared at her for a long time before nodding slowly. Then we go public. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day I signed those papers. Purpose. I'd been silent long enough. And now, my silence was about to become very, very loud. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The city was still half asleep, the skyline wrapped in mist like it was trying to hide from what was coming. My laptop glowed in the dark, waiting. I opened the files Mora had sent overnight, hundreds of pages of internal communications, contracts, and memos from TransGlobe's integration team. Buried in the legalese were phrases. That chilled me. Data migration consent, automated employee performance scoring, predictive work hour optimization. They weren't just using Link's logistics algorithm, they were weaponizing it. When we built that system, the goal had been simple: efficiency for small businesses. Fair scheduling, optimized routes, sustainable margins. But in TransGlobe's hands, the same code could become a surveillance engine tracking warehouse workers' movements, predicting productivity dips and flagging employees for termination before they even failed to meet quotas. It was exactly the kind of corporate rot we'd sworn Link would never become. By 6 a.m., I had everything compiled into one encrypted drive. I stared at it for a long moment, my cursor hovering over the folder name. Proof. I could feel the tremor in my hands. This was the point of no return. At 7:12, I answer. Just looked away, tears glinting in the morning light. Outside, the city kept moving, oblivious. But a girl to the Wanless team. And as night crept closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that Dock 47 wouldn't be a negotiation. It would be a reckoning. Zeas de had disfort and diesel. The place was half alive with sound fog, horns from the bay. The clatter of chains somewhere in the dark, the low churn of water under the pilings. Sodium, lights along the pier buzzed and flickered, turning the mist a sickly orange. I parked 100 feet away and walked the rest of the distance alone, each step loud against the wood. There was a single figure waiting near the end of the dock, hands clasped behind his back, the glow of a cigarette flaring against the wind. He wore a long coat too polished for the location, and, beside him, stood two men built like concrete. Mr. Callahan, the man said as I approached, voice smooth and unhurried. I appreciate your punctuality. I stopped 10 feet away. You wanted a conversation. Say what you came to say, he smiled faintly. I represent TransGlobe's executive interests. You've caused quite a stir, press leaks, shareholder panic, regulatory inquiries. Impressive work for someone who once preferred silence. You turned my company into a machine for surveillance, I said. You deserve everything that's coming. He exhaled smoke into the fog. You misunderstand us. Link's integration was about efficiency, not cruelty. The algorithm merely revealed what humans refuse to admit: some workers aren't efficient enough to justify their cost. We make the difficult choices so the economy survives. You turn people into spreadsheets, I said. He tilted his head. And you turned a partnership into a vendetta. Let's not play moral games. The two men shifted behind him, a subtle reminder of power. I kept my voice even. If you called me here to threaten me, save your breath. Threaten. He almost laughed. No, Mr. Callahan. I called to offer you peace. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, holding it just inside the halo of light. Inside is a non-disclosure agreement and a settlement offer. You sign, we call off the legal dogs. No prison, no bankruptcy, no public ruin. In exchange, you issue a statement, retracting your allegations and acknowledging a misunderstanding. We'll even release a statement praising your cooperation. I didn't take the folder, and if I refuse... His smile thinned. Then you'll spend the next decade fighting lawsuits you can't afford. While your friends become collateral damage, Ms. Morales, for instance Mara, I believe, she be implicated as a co-conspirator. And the journalist, Ms. Duran, will be discredited before the week ends. A few quiet calls to her editor, eh? Blue lights to swallow me. For once, I didn't feel fear, just a strange, quiet calm. Whatever came into me parofit. The interrogation room was small, colorless, and cold, the kind of place designed to make truth feel heavy. The fluorescent light hummed faintly above me. My hands were cuffed to the table, palms flat, eyes fixed on the mirrored wall. Somewhere behind it, I could feel the weight of judgment. A detective entered, middle-aged, tired but not unkind. Mr. Callahan, he said, taking a seat. You've had quite a night. Yeah, I murmured. That's one way to put it. He opened a folder and slid a photo across the table. Doc 12, floodlit, police tape fluttering. Vos a body half covering we weaponed. Premier. Looked at the picture for a long time before speaking. They took a journalist, tried to trade her life for silence. We didn't agree. He studied me, and the man who died? He made his choice. The detective exhaled slowly. We've corroborated parts of your story. The journalist confirms you saved her life. The woman, Mara, Morales, she's disappeared. No address, no phone records. You know where she is? I shook my head. No, but if she's smart, she's far away. He nodded, flipping the folder closed. For what it's worth, TransGlobe's in chaos. Federal investigators raided their offices at dawn. Your exposed set off a firestorm, labor violations, data abuse, corruption. The whole thing's unraveling. A strange calm spread through me. Tenit was worth it. Maybe, he said, leaning back. But you're still looking at obstruction, trespassing, and a manslaughter review. Even if the shooting's ruled self-defense, you'll be in court for months. I met his gaze. That's fine. As long as the truth stays out there. He studied me for another moment, then gathered his papers and stood. You do him? No, he said, pausing at the door. You could have just walked away, sold your shares, taken your money, disappeared. Why go through all this? I thought of the old Link office, the whiteboard covered in ideas, the smell of burnt coffee, and hope. I thought of Mira's voice that night, steady and furious. Undo it! Because silence built the problem, I said quietly. And silence never fixes what it breaks. He gave a small nod, almost respectful, then left me alone with my thoughts. Hours later, when they finally uncuffed me, I stepped out into the grey morning. The city skyline shimmered faintly beyond the harbor distant. Wounded, alive. Reporters clustered near the station entrance, microphones like spears, shouting my name. I didn't answer. Premier Jualked. Each step felt lighter than the last, though I knew what lay ahead wasn't freedom, it was consequence. But maybe consequence was the only kind of honesty left. My phone buzzed as I reached the edge of the pier. A single message from an unknown number. Greater than we did it, and I smiled. Not triumph, not relief. Just quiet understanding. Across the water. The dawn broke, fully thin light spilling across the bay, washing over the cranes and ships and warehouses where everything had ended. I stood there until the wind grew colder, until the past felt like something that could finally stay behind me. L'inquagone the company, the illusion. But the truth, it lived. And for the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't emptiness. It was peace. No, he said, pausing at the door. You could have just walked away. Sold your shares, taken your money, disappeared. Why go through all this? I thought of the old link office, the whiteboard covered in ideas, the smell of burnt coffee, and hope. I thought of Marat's voice that night, steady and furious. Undo it, because silence built the problem, I said quietly. And silence never fixes what it breaks. He gave a small nod, almost respectful, then left me alone with my thoughts. Hours later, when they finally uncuffed me, I stepped out into the grey morning. The city skyline shimmered faintly beyond the harbor, distant, wounded, alive. Reporters clustered near the station entrance, microphones like spears, shouting my name. I didn't answer. Premier Juelked. Each step felt lighter than the last, though I knew what lay ahead wasn't freedom, it was consequence. But maybe consequence was the only kind of honesty left. My phone buzzed as I reached the edge of the pier. A single message from an unknown number, greater than we did it, and I smiled. Not triumph. Not relief, just quiet understanding. Across the water. The dawn broke, fully thin light spilling across the bay, washing over the cranes and ships and warehouses where everything had ended. I stood there until the wind grew colder, until the past felt like something that could finally stay behind me. L'inquagone the company, the illusion, but the truth, it lived. And for the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't emptiness. It was peace.